My simple answer to the big question is visit the farmer. Most of us in Europe are very lucky to eat 3 times per day. And every time you eat, you are connected to agriculture. Agriculture is the sector and farmers are the sector or part of the society in which if you start making changes, those changes will have fundamental positive effect on other areas in which we are desperately needing change. Everybody wants to take benefits of carbon farmers in this or other shape. All big change starts with something very simple.
Welcome to our Carbon Farming Odyssey, a journey across uncharted territories where soil is not just earth, but a living asset. Together, we set sail across the vast ocean of sustainable agriculture, mapping new value chains and covering hidden opportunities, cooperating and cultivating the future of farming.
In today's episode, I welcome Mateusz Ciasnocha, a farmer, and he brings insight into how carbon farming is reshaping our landscapes, our economy, and our climate resilience. Let's dig in. The adventures begins now. Mateusz, after this short introduction, I would like to ask you about your journey, about how did it happen that you are here and what kind of experience you have and what are you coming with to our discussion today.
Thank you, first of all, for having me, and it's a pleasure to be with you, Piotr, to do this as part of numerous things that we are doing together, and thank you for your work with Carbon Farming CE and more broadly. To answer your question, I would like to say briefly about two areas. So let me start with what I do right now, and then I will share briefly what that experience is rooted in. So as you introduced me, I am a farmer from northern Poland, involved in a family business that owns and manages 700 hectares or a little bit over 700 hectares of what are now permanent grasslands. And we are producing hay of the highest quality that we supply for domestic, meaning Polish and international markets. And that experience of the farm is the primary experience that other things I do right now are built on. And those other experiences are, or areas of activity, vehicles to change the world, if you will, in line with the mission, which is building a farmer-centric bridge between climate and agricultural policies, are two. One is European Carbon Farmers, the business that is registered here in Poland that does advisory and consulting work in the field of carbon farming, regenerative agriculture, sustainable agriculture, many names, same goal, which is to farm in a way that is aligned with nature. We also have Horizon Europe project as part of this business called Midas that we can talk more about later on. But one vehicle is this European Carbon Farmers, and that is rooted on family farm experience of transitioning to regenerative agriculture and having the model of operation that we have now with the story that underpins it. And the second vehicle to change the world is the Farm of Francesco, which is a business, once again, that has been born within the Economy of Francesco process. Economy of Francesco process is a community which was born because of invitation of Pope Francis that I responded to, and as part of working and serving in that process, me together with 14 other people from all around the world, we founded Farm of Francesco. That is training farmers and bringing their voices into international processes. We just returned from UNFCCC's SB subsidiary bodies meeting 62 in Bonn. That is still happening as we speak because it's a long meeting, 2 weeks. So that plus final thing, a few boards, Cool Farm Alliance, that is very important as well when it comes to talking about carbon market, carbon farming ecosystem in Europe, in Poland, and more broadly globally. Also EU Soil Mission and the Economy of Francesco Foundation, so a foundation that is serving Economy of Francesco community. So that's kind of my portfolio right now. I am a farmer who was born on a normal and an extraordinary at the same time farm of hardworking farmers producing food to the best of their abilities in one of the most fertile regions of Poland, in northern Poland. When I've been born, the farm was approximately 40 hectares. Right now we have 700 hectares, so we grew a lot, and we had times for that, and we used those times. We used the moment of entry of Poland to the European Union 2004 and what followed to transform and transition the farm. And as that was happening, I was very privileged because I wanted, but also because I was supported to do that by my parents mainly, and the business, to go abroad and study, bring knowledge to the farm, share the knowledge emerging from the farm in those international processes or environments in which I was privileged to be. And then things follow from there. One final note, which is an important one. My wife, whom I met thanks to the economy of Francesco, is Argentinian, and her family is also farming in Argentina. So I do have this unique insight into Mercosur and the state of play there, how they are farming in what seems to be very, very far away land.
Yeah, it's very interesting also to ask about your opinion about the Mercosur and so on, but I think you will come to this point and question later on. So first of all, I would like to just bring some frame, and I would like to ask you, because I have you have often said that agriculture can play a really vital role in a climate crisis, and can also help to adapt and change some, or maybe slower down the climate change. And I would like to ask you about your vision of carbon farming, how it can help in a global transformation, but also how it can help in general if we change some direction to make Earth still alive. Yeah.
That's the point. This alive, quality is what makes soil, right? Unless you have life in the soil, it's not soil. Soil is a living organism, which is a thought that is probably not new to the listeners of this podcast, but it's really a fundamental thought. Great question and very big question. So let me provide some framing and then specific answers building on that framing. You mentioned the crisis, and indeed we are in a crisis. We are in a climate crisis, which is fairly simple, one-dimensional. We emit more greenhouse gas emissions than what we should be to be within safe planetary boundary when it comes to climate change and global warming. We have two ways of doing something about it. We can, and we should, and we are doing that. We should lower our emissions so that we are emitting less and slowing down the pace of that process. And at the same time, sequestering what we have already released and maybe more to once again slow down the consequences of global warming and limit the risks. So that's one dimension of the crisis, of the ecological crisis. We mentioned planetary boundaries. When you look at other cycles of nature and other planetary boundaries, like our use of fertilizers, but more than that, plant nutrients or nutrient cycling, our biodiversity cycle, our water management, we are in some of those in much higher crisis areas than when it comes to climate change. We are not good when it comes to climate change, the climate crisis that you mentioned, but we are even more risky situations in those other dimensions. And the point I'm trying to make by saying all of this is in big part because we do agriculture as we do. Maybe we right now in Poland are not deforesting, but in general, agriculture is contributing to deforestation. Agriculture is contributing to loss of carbon from the carbon sink that is soil. So this is, on average, state of the play. That is connected, and I don't want to go into that, with a social crisis that we have. And as we are speaking right now, we have, unfortunately, wars increasing than decreasing badly. So you have a social crisis in there. And indeed, if agriculture is contributing so much, plus we are eating food, most of us, not all, unfortunately, but we are eating food 3 times per day. So we are connected, and therefore it's a no-brainer. Agriculture is part of the solution. And in my view, and as I understand the word, agriculture is the sector and farmers are the sector, or part of the society, in which if you start making changes, those changes will have fundamental effect, a positive effect on other areas in which we are desperately needing change. And that area of change is our soil and its soil health, which once again, unfortunately, in the Polish case, is on decline and is at risk. Our food security, but also other environmental ecosystem services that are being delivered by healthy soil. And you guys at IUNG are the best institution in Poland to tell us the data, how things are, and things are not going very well. So now how do you change it? And this is where carbon farming comes in, which in short, I understand carbon farming as a language that helps me talk intelligently in a way that is creating an atmosphere of dialogue rather than, oh, you are bad or you are doing something wrong. But it's a tool, it's a language that allows us to, first of all, talk in a way that is constructive with each other, meaning in the agricultural community. And once we are constructive with each other, we can go out and be constructive, inviting other stakeholders and connecting with other policies, especially in similar manner, especially the climate policy. We talk about the climate crisis. We have agriculture, in my view, and now the time is right for that. It might not be the case in a few years' time when window opportunity closes. Carbon farming is a language to transform agriculture, that has the potential of transforming agriculture and doing so in harmony with other policies that we have, so that we deliver multiple wins at the same time.
You have covered quite a lot from my another question. I was listening carefully because it's very important what you said, that soil is a foundation, and because we have a healthy soil, then we can produce, and we can also take care of a yield. And can you just a bit extend your vision of carbon farming, also the difference between the regenerative farming, because we are able to hear both of terms, but in practice, you are the farmer, you are the person who try to also translate the language to many of the stakeholders. So can you say a few sentences more about your definition, how it looks in the practice? Is it only sequestration, which is a very popular term now, and many of people of interest says about the sequestration, but as far as we know, the regenerative farming is broader, and it's also a kind of a philosophy, a direction. Yeah, so please extend.
Once again, big questions. So yes, consequence of carbon farming, of doing carbon farming right, is sequestering carbon. What you need to have before that is maintaining the carbon that you have, right? So, and creating the right conditions so that sequestration happens. And every single farmer of the world, that's why carbon farming as a language is so useful in my view and our experience. Every single farmer of the world is a carbon farmer. He or she might not know that there's a carbon cycle in my ecosystem, that I am invited, and I have, in my view, a responsibility, duty of stewarding. How am I stewarding that? Am I a good carbon farmer? i.e., I am regenerative, I am increasing carbon cycle, I am enhancing the resilience of my ecosystem, and therefore I am farming in a way in which ecosystem is producing more ecosystem services, or I am degenerative carbon farmer, in which I am taking from the ecosystem more than what that ecosystem is giving me, and I am putting at risk, first and foremost, viability of my farm from future generations, but also food security and all those higher things. To get it practical, we need to talk about practices when it comes to regenerative agriculture.
Exactly.
And
sorry, just like I will extend it to what you would like to say now, but I would like to come to your farm, also to your history of connection with the practices, because as I understand, your farm was also changing, and you had some transformation, also collaborating with family members. So please tell a bit about your a farm, and what do you introduce, what helps in your opinion in the short term and long term, and how also your family has changed, or maybe members of thinking of also experimenting. Yeah, please.
a lot in there. So to start with the practices, for a farm that is operating right now, because in a lot of parts of the world, I'm thinking about Latin America, but also Africa, you have farms that are starting. So you didn't have agriculture in an ecosystem, on a piece of land, and then you introduce agricultural activity there. So for that farm, the order would be exactly the opposite to the order I will be sharing. But for existing farm, you have 5 areas of action to either get on the path of regeneration, or if you are on this path of regeneration, to continue being on that path and being more regenerative year after year. First area is of optimization of inputs. Think about seeds, about fertilizers, both synthetic or natural, and crop protection, which can once again be natural or done in a synthetic way. With, of course, the idea being that you want to decrease and not use at some point, as soon as possible, the synthetic ones, so that you are self-sufficient and the ecosystem is healthier. So first area is input use optimization. Second area of action when it comes to implementing regenerative farm and achieving outcomes of regeneration, like soil carbon sequestration, like water maintenance within the ecosystem, like production of biomass with that water and with this carbon, so that the ecosystem is more abundant and you produce more. Second area of action is minimization of tillage, land tillage, ideally with stopping plowing in crops that is possible. That creates conditions for soil health to be starting and to be maintained once you are there, or if you are in that situation. In order to enhance that soil health, then we move to the third practice, which is keeping soil cover 365 days per year, ideally with living root, so that carbon is being pumped effectively from the atmosphere to the soil. Carbon, that liquid carbon that plants in photosynthesis or through the process of photosynthesis have captured, is the food that soil food web that we have in the soil needs in order to be alive. And so you increase that with area number 3, the keeping land cover 365 days per year with soil that have living roots. Then we go beyond pure carbon farming with practice number 4, which is increasing biodiversity, both within field, around field, and ecosystem wide. And then area number 5, naturally emerging from that, is embedding farm in an ecosystem, so site-specific design. We apply all of those actions and areas of action on our farm, starting with minimization and optimization, and now minimization of input use. As you know, we've been producing cereals in the past. We optimized that production thanks to the CAP in 2004, and then we transitioned to what is a natural state of the ecosystem for the ecosystem that our land is, which is very wet, very hard to farm. If you spread fertilizer there, it will basically be washed away by water that is standing after winter. So you are effectively losing money and polluting environment. We are not doing that any longer because we have permanent grassland, which is area number 3 of keeping the soil cover 365 days a year. And those grasslands are natural. So if there's what a normal farmer or conventional farmer would consider wheat, for us, it's a biodiversity species that is providing more resilience to that system. So we are using that, and that applies to every farm of the world. Like you can, on any farm that there is, small and big, family owned, corporate owned, like you name the labor that you would apply to a farm. Every single farm of the world, just like every single farm of the world can think about itself through the lens of carbon farming, can think and can apply a lot of those practices from regenerative agriculture toolkit, those 5 areas that we mentioned. And once again, carbon farming is an entry point to this broader toolkit that regenerative agriculture offers.
Yeah, wow, quite a broad perspective and really systematic. Yeah, so I think I'll take it for myself how to present in general all the frame. As we know, to provide all of these elements which you mentioned, we need some resources, and one of these resources is the money, of course, because we have to, we need to buy, we need to invest, we need to develop. Nowadays we hear a lot about possibilities of collaboration with the companies who offer certificates, who offer also carbon credits or some other activities which can increase the streams. And I would like to ask you, as a farmer, as also a person who is interested as like a CEO of European Carbon Farmers, of this, can it help in the long term? And also, what are the risks and what are the difficulties for the farmers who would like to join programs which are currently discussed?
So there's a portfolio of programs available out there, and maybe let's focus on 3 or 4 main ones, right? Starting with the core of the question, which are carbon credits, carbon certificates, 2 different things. Credits are financial instrument that is equal to 1 ton of CO2 equivalent, either avoided or removed from the avoided emission or sequestration. That is packaged as a financial product that has a price and is traded between 2 actors, probably with an intermediary in between. And that carbon, if you will, can move from one value chain to another. Carbon certificate is effectively very similar thing, but staying within the value chain so that all actors of the value chain can claim it. And this is where what we see food producers and processors in Europe are seeing the interest in. There's more interest in value chain solutions and approaches than in pure carbon offsetting. Because that has higher, it's more respected by the market. It's more valuable product, and there's you can relate to that. We do have, and that's why I want to mention that in this part of our exchange conversation. Let's not forget we have the CAP, Common Agricultural Policy of the European Union, that is effectively paying for a lot of the things that well-designed carbon farming scheme would pay for. But the way CAP, Common Agricultural Policy, is structured is different to carbon farming projects. CAP pays for actions which do translate into some environmental outcome. And we are at the beginning of a stage in which CAP is paying for results, but the view and the path for the CAP that I am seeing personally, and we are seeing as European carbon farmers, is paying for results. So moving the CAP away from action-based payments to result-based payments. And this is where carbon farming and those private schemes that you are asking about are really, really useful, because we are opening up naturally the questions of, hey, are we paying double or not? How do we not pay double? And then, of course, the farmer in the situation that we are in right now has a choice between saying, okay, I will take the subsidy or I will take the carbon payment. from a private market. Now you can do both when it's available. There are less programs available than what the media seem to imply, and those programs that are available are, some have track record of paying farmers, but most don't, so it's early stage. Plus we are not putting that high price of on a ton of carbon either. So even if you do the maths and you have a program available, hey, the extra income right now might not be that material for your farm. Having that said, you asked me in the first questions, and we talked before about the fundamental challenge that we have in front of us. We also discuss, hey, times are challenging. There are a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunities, and we need systemic approaches to go through that time, to transform or to continue on the right path if we are on that right path. And once again, and that's why your project exists as well, we see carbon farming as a very useful, timely tool that has the potential of not being the silver bullet, but being very important tool for us to get to the right path for those who need it, continue and accelerate on the right path for those who already are there, and connect with others, meaning other policies, health policy, climate policy, national security policy, to deliver those other goals and needs that we have. I will also mention, finally, if you allow me, as a way of funding, very important source of funding, fairly untouched source of funding from the perspective of farmers, innovation budget of the European Union, especially with Horizon Europe program, and especially with Soil Mission program, but also Cluster 6, the bioeconomy cluster, that Midas project that we have as a business, we are partnering, is funded exactly through that funding mechanism. And I would encourage every farmer listening to us and every farm advisor that is working with farmers to get interested in those programs by, for example, contacting a research institute like yours in Poland or similar in other parts of Europe, to say, hey, we heard there is this something that can support us on doing more of the things that we want to do, or allowing us to do new things that we want to do but we don't have the budget to do it, right? So I encourage also looking into and building relationships to benefit from that source of money, which is there and which is transformational. And the starting point, if I were a farmer, would be what is now called EU-PIB network. Back then it was called, or in the past it was called EAP Agri, with its focus groups and operational groups. That's how we get into the space of innovation, and we do a lot of work that we do right now. We said, hey, we want to participate in those processes. We listened a lot, we shared our experience, which turned out to be very useful for others, the experience of practitioner, and then completely new window of opportunity opens to you. But it's hard work, as you know very well.
Fully agree to what you said about the EU-PIB network. I had the pleasure to visit Prague at the end of April, and it was really great event. Also, it was like possible to collaborate with many of the partners and also share the perspective. You said something about the systemic change, and I fully agree. We have different approaches. We can go from the top to down, and we can also go from bottom to up. We of course have involvement of the policymakers of European Commission. We have also the governments which are in our countries, which are shaping the biggest support aid, which is a CAP. But also we can do a lot from the perspective of a bottom up, what we do in our national bioeconomy hub, and we try to bring some ideas and some manifesto, or we meet to work within the workshops. So I would like to ask you now, based on your experience, not only as a farmer but also as I can say globetrotter who goes to many important places and listen to the people, because I really appreciate that you are involved in many of the activities. I would like to ask you, in your opinion, what we can do in both approaches to help develop carbon farming and also to make it more important than it is now, and also how it can help to develop the agriculture? It's another complex question, but I know that you will fully be able to answer.
So let me try for another time to answer a complex question with this, or its multifaceted question, with something simple, or in my view, in my experience, all big change starts with something very simple. And the climate conversation will lead us ultimately to talking about United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and those global meetings and United Nations. And our key invitation and ask in those spaces is visit the farmer. So I would say very simple action to take at scale to deliver on all of the things that you mentioned, the bottom-up change, the top-down support of what works at bottom-up, starts with, in my view, visiting a farmer. So if you are not a farmer listening to us, visit a farmer right now. Like as you listen to us, like, open another tab in your computer or pause and search, hey, farmers around me to visit, and make an effort to make this connection, to make a human connection, and say, hey, I am here because somebody said you need to visit the farmer. Do this, especially if you are a policymaker, please. And if you are a farmer, open your farm, invite others to the farm to just explain what you do, show that, and engage in a conversation. And I know, because this is our work, this is your work as well, a lot of us do exactly that. And from my experience, that's why I also mentioned EU-CAP network, Horizon Europe projects, EU Soil Mission, all those amazing things that are happening there in big part are rooted in those often informal one-on-one meetings or meetings in small scale that lead to a lot of aha moments. And those aha moments leads to, hey, we need to be doing something because it's not being done, or it's going in the wrong direction unless we do something, or the pace of that change is too slow. So my simple answer to the big question is visit the farmer. And in those encounters, we really, 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 really need top important people or institutions, just doing what is harder and harder in the era of being always connected and on your phone and all of that, which is just spending time listening, observing, taking that day off to be at the farm. So then you can come back to your desk or to the negotiation room saying, hey, I visited a farmer or a set of farmers. I know why I'm working the work and what I'm trying to change or support in real life level. And if I reach a wall, if you will, then I have a phone number or a few phone numbers or more than few phone numbers to call and say, hey, look, this is me. I met you, a year ago. I am working at the ministry at this law. What do you think? That's how we change the world. We change the world by connecting with each other and very much informing from bottom up, those higher level things. That's how the European Union works, principle of subsidiarity. But we need to leave it at scale over time so that it works, because it works. Our experience shows it works, but we need to leave it.
To achieve all of this, what you said, I think it's important to shape the narration of the message. Also, when we discuss about the education and like a communication. So I would like to ask you now also from your perspective, because we know that the narration is important from our research. Like it comes that, for example, talking to the farmers that they are contributing to secure the climate is kind of abstractive, but if we talk to them that they are adapting to the climate change and they will be able to produce and have a specific yield, and it will help them. Also, it will influence on the capacity of the farms. what you can recommend and also what you can suggest how the message should be shaped to people who don't have a lot in common with agriculture. So this is the first group. The second groups are the young farmers who are like entering the market. We know a huge problem is because of the not only demography but also of moving from villages to cities. I was last month in Greece and we talk a lot there, and there's a huge issue there. And the third one is a group which can change locally the phenomena as a farmers, what they can do to change not only their farms, but also to contribute systemic change in the regional, national, and in the European level scale. So just I will briefly resume
I wanted to ask you.
Yeah. So we have a group of people who don't have a lot of in common with agriculture. The second group is young farmers. And the third one, the third sub-question is how to make the farmers believe that they can impact not only their farm, but also regional, national, or European level.
Thank you for the question, the resume. It's good to keep me in check. You know my key ask or key invitation, which is visit a farmer. And my biggest invitation to those who are not involved with agriculture directly is visit a farmer. And because that will not happen at scale just because I issue the invitation, there's a job to be done on the farming end, on the farmer's end, to go out and bring the farm, if you will, to those other stakeholders by going to the ministry, that of course deals with agriculture, and going to others ministries, by going to your kid's school and saying, just like there's a firefighter that, right? We just celebrated Father's Day in Poland yesterday, saying, hey, I am, this is who I am, introducing yourself as a person. Plus, I always like to say and think and then say, hey, we have more in common than what we think. Just because you are not directly involved in agriculture, it doesn't mean you don't have a connection with agriculture. Most of us in Europe are very lucky, and this is not normal globally as we speak, to eat 3 times per day. And every time you eat, you are connected to agriculture. Just like, I might not be directly involved in medical research, but every time I go to the doctor, I am beneficiary of that. Or even now I am a beneficiary because I have multiple vaccines that I received that make me alive. Otherwise, I might not be here, for 15 years because I would pass away. So there is a connection, and the best way of framing the narrative is don't assume you are connected, but you are not connected, but find the connection point and build from there. And there's no better connection point than visiting a farm and eating food on that farm. It's like very real, very material. That's why the invitation visit a farm. To young farmers, your second subset question. My invitation would be very much specific to that group. Manage your cash flow. It's very easy to, be dreaming about, I'm changing the world with agriculture and all of that, which is true. But that is possible only if your business is making money. And for that, you need to be competitive across others farms. Like, you have to be farming in a way that is with cost control, and that you are making money, and your levels of risk and all of that, and which is not the paradigm that a lot have, but I think it's critical for success nowadays and leads to multiple benefits in short, medium, and long term, is you need collaboration. So don't fall as a young person as such, but young farmer in particular, in the mindset of I cannot be collaborating, I cannot be open, I need to be very competitive always and in everything, because that doesn't work. And I am thinking straight away about, stacked enterprises, like for example, in case of our farm, this Horizon Europe project that we are partnering is possible only because we are having already a lot of resources in place that we can easily put into the project. We are dreaming about having young farmers on our farm running, for example, a vegetable market or a fruit market like a strawberry field. We cannot do that as core family and core operational group because we are busy with what we do, but there are so many opportunities, very exciting opportunities to do way more there on the farm in collaboration with others, especially youth, and we are open to that. So think in those way. And then your third sub question was the farmers as such, and once again I am of an opinion that is rooted in experience of trying, of going to the regional, national, European, and global, and realizing, hey, actually my perspective is really important in those spaces. It is not the most important perspective, don't think you are that important, no. But it is important that you share your experience in those spaces. And in my personal path, I've been called by the United Nations to share my personal experience in COP26 process that opened up a lot of the work that we are doing right now, but I was invited to share that experience. And now both with European Carbon Farmers and the Farm of Francesco, we are creating opportunities for farmers to be engaged in those processes because first of all, we have personal experience of those processes and that involvement changing our life. And secondly, knowing that those processes really need that insight, that input, the bottom-up input that you mentioned in one of your previous questions. And then you realize, once again, final point I will say here, and we talked about that before, you realize there's always a connection point. We talk about Mercosur at the very, very beginning, right? Where the current narrative, at least on the farm of average European farmer, is no way. It cannot happen. Why exactly? Well, because there's fear. Whereas if you visited a Brazilian farmer and you know the reality of Brazilian farmer or US farmer, that's not Mercosur, but an important agriculture player, or Argentinian farmer, you realize, well, yes, there are risks, of course, but there's so much that connects us that it's a no-brainer not to collaborate. And those fears of collaboration are always, or most of the time, rooted in lack of experience, not knowledge, but lack of experience. So experience is really what we need.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so to have, to become true and to have this dream, also to develop farmers, we have to have them locally on the countryside. Yeah. So because we are also facing the lack of labor and also difficulties with the involvement of the farmers, how, in your opinion, we can encourage them to stay in the countryside and also to become a leader of the modern regenerative agriculture? What are the key factors you think that they can somehow increase the probability that we would have them on the countryside and they can become leaders and also have families and children and develop?
The easiest question at the end, right? Oh, we talk about systemic approaches, right? And I alluded a little bit to social challenges that are manifesting itself through ecological crisis more broadly and very, very narrowly by climate crisis. And I am thinking about this. The question you are asking me, I think, is in its core and in majority way outside of the scope of what carbon farming can do. But carbon farming can advance us and accelerate into that dream vision of regeneration, if you will, right? In which we have thriving thriving rural areas and urban as well. Why not? Like, we need thriving urban areas as well. And we need both of them to be collaborating with each other, right? And I have a long list of obvious things that we know for years in the space that need to happen, like access to broadband, better public transport network for those older of us, to be able to move to the doctor that is in the city, that probably needs to be subsidized outside of the agricultural budget, of course, because it's a social budget. So we have those not little but very long list of kind of obvious and small things that need to be there in order to that thriving rural fabric being possible. And once again, starting with what is under your control. Most of the farms that I know that are operating in Poland have the possibility of inviting somebody else to the farm, saying, hey, let's collaborate in a way that is not threatening, but enhancing my business and yours business. Because I have some resources that you might be missing, like half a hectare of land, but you want to work, producing vegetables. And by the way, we need vegetables that are locally grown and are healthy and nutritious and all of that in this society or in this local community. So local solutions are local. I can share things, and we are sharing what works for us, like the European project, bringing knowledge on how to put trees into the ecosystem. I know you guys have very similar project here in Puławy. So that knowledge exists. It's a matter of that knowledge, that experience, that learning exists. The failures that we have done, that we are happy to share over the years as well, it's just a matter of putting people through it, which is once again the invitation that you heard: visit the farmer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have talked also now about the collaboration. As far as I know, we have many of people, institutions, companies who you collaborate, and they are from the different groups of stakeholders. So I would like to ask you, what can help to have a effective communication between the scientist, like a business, farmer, administration? What are the a basis, a foundation, in your opinion, that can help to talk more effective, and because of that, to boost the carbon farming concept?
We talked, preparing for the podcast, about some of our colleagues, and we are very privileged to be working with a lot of colleagues like that who have passion. And it really comes to my mind now that you asked the question, like what really helps? Passion, be passionate about what you do. Because, and that applies to everything that we talked so far in this conversation, you will have tough moments. Carbon markets, talking about developing carbon markets that of course we are passionate about and we want to do it, that is tough. You have trade-offs, you have different interests, you have actors who want to take shortcuts. So passion really helps. And I would say is critical in achieving this reality that you are asking about. And simultaneously to that, we really need to listen to each other. It's fine to disagree, to say, hey, you know what? This project that you are thinking about, I as a farm cannot do, because, for example, you want me to do the project when I am harvesting, and I cannot be doing that because otherwise, like, my farm collapses. Which maybe will invite on the side of the farmer a process in which the farmer changes his or her way of operating, or this one that is thinking about a joint project will say, you know what, you cannot do the work, but you are having, for example, that what we want to measure, your soil, for example, right? Or quality of biomass that you are producing, or a nutritional value of that regeneratively grown wheat, thanks to our new methodology that we are trying to develop or perfect. So we will put a person that will do those measurements because we need it for our work, and you cannot do this, or we just recognize that you as a farmer, for example, in this specific case, you cannot be harvesting and taking measures at the same time. It requires an extra person. So be passionate, that really helps, and listen, and mark areas in which there's a disagreement or tension, both of which are fine. But we need to be clear, hey, this one is not possible for now, or this is missing in order for us to do something. And we know from our experience, right? Like, we have a few very good projects happening with each other. We would love to do probably 30 more, but they are not possible for now.
Talking about the collaboration and effective transfer of the message, I would like to ask you about the Mercosur, because I promised at the beginning that I will ask you about that, knowing also that your wife comes from this part of Earth, and I'm just thinking about extracting as good as possible from that, yeah, having like in mind that it could happen that the Mercosur will like enter Central Europe, and also it will influence on our farming. I am thinking, what are the advantages and also some pros about that? So maybe you can share when you think about the Mercosur, how it can help develop agriculture, how it can influence our agriculture in a positive way, and also maybe there is some connection with the carbon farming.
Yes, so once again, broad, deep questions, and a lot of things come to mind, a few critical ones to share. Just like European agriculture, Mercosur is not one, meaning you don't have a type of farm in Mercosur. You have different farming systems and different farming realities in Mercosur. Just like a farm in Lubelskie is different to the farm in Małopolskie and farm to the Netherlands, to say, because we are speaking English, so I don't want to use only Polish names of regions. But just like European agriculture is very diverse, and you cannot say, hey, we have European agriculture and stop there, and you need to be more granular. Same with Mercosur. And what you are seeing with Mercosur is that when it comes to natural reality, meaning the ecosystem's reality, the soils are not amazing. We have better soils, but we have different climate. They have more water. They have longer or much longer growing periods. They have different pest pressures and all of that. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that with all of this and more that we are not touching, at commodity basis, they have lower costs of producing commodities, soybeans, corn, which, by the way, soybeans we are not producing that much in Poland yet. And maybe we should focus on developing other sources of protein like lupins and horse beans, rather than trying to compete on soybeans with Brazil, for example. Also thinking about resilience and this biodiversity, point at a global level. So when it comes to competing at commodity prices, the market is global. It's also undercut by Russia dumping wheat, because that's what they produce, at below world prices. That is affecting everyone: US, Europe, Mercosur. So therefore, what is the opportunity and job to be done? The opportunity is there for a lot of Europe, and Poland unfortunately has a lot of job to be done in order to fit itself or to use the opportunity that I am seeing, which is positioning of value-added products on the market. I'm thinking about geographical indications of the European Union, right? In Poland, we have less than 100 products with that. Italy has more than 2,000. And agriculture, let's not forget, is about producing food. Like, yes, it's about stewarding ecosystem, all of that, but as a farmer, your job is to produce food. And you might be, and you should, and you will, hopefully, be rewarded for ecosystem services and all of those wonderful things. But a world in which we are not producing food, that has its space in the market, I don't think is the future that we want to put Europe into. And especially at the Polish level, we do have a massive job to be done, in my view, of finding or realizing what are the products that we have that are local to the regions, and creating or renewing or strengthening or all of that value chains to produce those products. So then we can put them competitively at markets in Mercosur, but also in Asia, which is already a huge demand center for those products. And of course, on our own markets, like we need to be eating food that, our grandma remembers, because it's good for us and it strengthens those local markets. So I see huge job to be done there. Same story with the context. If we forget about Mercosur and we just think about Ukraine, somehow joining the European community, same analysis emerges. Like, hey, we can compete in commodities, but it's a game that we know it's lost. So why would you? And then, of course, everybody wants to take benefits of carbon farmers in this or other shape. We talked at the beginning and earlier, every single farmer of the world is a carbon farmer because of how Mercosur farms, which is not dependent on tillage. You have a lot of direct seeding, you have double cropping, you do have cover crops in those systems. They do produce not only cheaper commodities, but those commodities have lower carbon footprint because they are not plowing and oxidating or literally burning carbon that is in the soil. So those are the things that we have to keep in mind. And learning from both sides would be very useful, meaning European farmers, Polish farmers going to those realities, learning, seeing, asking questions, exchanging phone numbers. Now with the technology that we have, you don't even have to speak Portuguese or Spanish or English to communicate with the other person. You can speak in your own language and you will get translated. That is critical. We need people. And we need, or Mercosur and Africa as well, but it's of course different geography, and we are not talking about the trade agreement with the African continent or part of it, African Union, for example, which is a great, really impressive case of how continent works together. They need capital to develop, and it matters which kind of capital will follow. I know you had SLM partners previously or alongside me in this podcast. This is an example of investor, both we in Poland, but also in Latin America, they would need, right? And what better dream and job to be done at the same time would be to have a group of 5 Polish farmers being really good in what they do, putting together resources to support a group of other 5 farmers in, say, Brazil, for that matter, in growing their businesses, right? Mm-hmm. So that we can participate on both sides of the table, and those markets are ready to receive capital.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Interesting. I mean, I could really listen long, and I think our listeners also would like to have some extension of that discussion, because there are many of issues which can be still presented in detail in the future.
Come and visit our farm so that we can continue those discussions over a cup of tea and
definitely
beautiful. Hopefully you will judge, but good, healthy food, and do also find ways of getting yourself engaged in those regional, national, local, and global processes. Farmers have their constituency, farmers' constituency, to the UNFCCC. So there are farmers in that process. For example, there are, of course, farmers at the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. And your voices there are super important.
This is exactly almost my last question to you today. Before I ask the last one, I would like to ask you about the alliances, the critical alliances which can help effectively scale up carbon farming. One of them, which comes to my mind because I know that you have been there, is UNFCCC event. What kind of takeaways you can bring to us visiting this event, being in Bonn, but also what kind of alliances you can say that can help to scale up carbon farming?
So thank you for bringing Bonn SB62 subsidiary bodies meeting to the UNFCCC convention in Bonn. That is still happening as we speak. I've been there together with my colleagues last week on the ground, and the meeting is still continuing. From policy point of view, what is very encouraging and is a huge success, also made possible by farmers that are there and other food system professionals and experts, is that food and agriculture is being formally recognized as critical part of the climate change solution. Because let's not forget, as Tomasz Hruszczov reminded us at the joint meeting of Carbon Farming CEE and Midas project that happened here a month ago, here in Puławy, the key goal of the UNFCCC process and Paris Agreement is to get people out of poverty in a way that is climate aligned. So that is happening. However, that is happening in a pretty slow way. That's why I mentioned the policymakers visiting the farmers and those connections being there. One type of policymaker is a negotiator in the convention. And that group of people who I say hello to because I know many of them, we met in Bonn last week, they know me, some of them visited the farm. It's really critical that the connection between those working on the ground in agriculture, but also other sectors, and those who are negotiating and representing and setting the level of ambition and reporting on it, are present. So what I'm trying to say is we need more farmers connected with bureaucrats and negotiators in those international processes, and we need more bureaucrats and negotiators after those international important meetings, which are really important, coming back to their nations and going to the field, to the food processing factory, to construction site, because we have a lot of emissions in construction, to transport site, we have a lot of emissions in transport, right? To energy sites, we have a lot of emissions in energy. So we really need that acceleration. And presidency of COP30, Brazilian presidency, the next COP will take place in Brazil, is saying and inviting the parties, so the countries, exactly to that, to say, to move from ambition to action, to implement our ambition. And once again, Tomasz Hruszczov, who held the role of high-level champion, is an example of that UNFCCC mandated position that is encouraging non-state actors, so everyone that is not a government, for example, a business or a foundation, that naturally moves faster than a government. That space, the farmers, the businesses who have net zero commitments and who are a source of demand for carbon certificates, for example, growing source of demand, are showing to governments, hey, we are not only with you on that net zero ambition, but we are delivering, and we are there, once again, thinking in the bottom-up approach, to share our learnings with you so that we can be even more ambitious and faster with implementation than you are otherwise on your own. We cannot do that alone, the challenge that we have.
Yes. At the end, I would like to imagine that you have a possibility to transfer the message to one of the farmers in southeastern Poland. And how would you persuade him that what he does in his farm matter, and how can it help not only like locally but also globally?
So I would find a she farmer in that part of Poland that are usually easier to convince and are more adventurous and open to taking new initiatives, or a he that is open as well. But I would say hello and find there within that farm something to praise and to say, hey, I relate with that. We do it the same way on the farm. Or why are you doing this differently to us? We are doing this like that. What is your logic for doing it differently, so that I can also learn? So I would start with a relationship, and once I have a yes of the person of wanting to commit to give, to receive more in the future, I would take that farmer with me to those meetings that we are having in Warsaw, we are having in Brussels, we are having in Bonn and in Rome at FAO, so that he or she can share his or her story, his or her experience. Not like, hey, what I think, but I have this experience and therefore I think this. To give opportunity for the person to just share what he or she is doing, and with that inform those processes that we need informing.
Mateusz, I also appreciate for opportunity to talk with you and also to listen to you. So today our guest was Mateusz Ciasnocha, a farmer but also CEO of European Carbon Farmers. Mateusz, I hope we'll meet again, and all the best in your further activities for boosting the carbon farming in Poland and also in whole Europe. Many thanks.
Thank you for having me. Please visit the farm, and looking forward to the next one. Very grateful.